Check, 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 check. 1, 2. Check, 1, 2. Check, 1, 2. Just checking to see if you can hear me okay and see me okay. All right, cool. So we've got Clayt here, Mark here, Anthony, Scotty, Jack, Francis, Ricky, Aaron, Francis, Darren, Randolph. Awesome. Good. Thank you. Thank you, Cedric. Okay, cool. Well, thank you. Scotty, hi, everybody. Hi, Francis. All right, so I am glad to be here with you all. I've been recording all day and got my hair back and my glasses on and taking it easy here. So hey, Paul. Hey, Mark. There's a lot of great questions today. I was actually, this is really fun. And I'm going to try and get to everybody on the chat if we have any questions there too. But really good questions. Kudos to all of you for asking the questions that you have. This has been really great. Usually I try and take a few minutes beforehand to kind of go through them to make sure that I have a general idea of what I'm going to give you an example of. And there's just some really good stuff in there. Hey, Will. Hey, Sam. Hey, Peter. So what we'll do here is we'll get started, and I will look at some of these questions and then answer your questions as well. Let's see, is there anything new in my world? I don't think so. Got back from Germany, still decompressing from that. I got a couple of bands that I've been playing with, rehearsing with for some shows, probably in 2020, probably international shows. But that's all good. Everything's good there. I'm still going to encourage you all to give consideration to doing the Rockin' 1000. If you can find a way, if it's in your neighborhood, wherever it is you live, or you can find a way swinging it, I think some of you would really love it, and it would be a lot of fun. I'm not saying that from some sort of sponsored place. I thought it was really great. So anyway, all right, let's go ahead and get going here with some of your questions. Let's see here. Okay, so here's a good one. Ken Bennett, which I'm not sure if Ken is out there. I didn't see Ken, but he might be out there. So anyway, hi Ken, if you're out there. He said, I've heard you say that the seventh chord is not used much in pop music, and when it is, it's used incorrectly. Would you give an example of how you may use it correctly and common ways that it's used incorrectly? So I think that's a really great question. And I think, honestly, it kind of depends on the style of music that you listen to, whether or not you're actually going to hear a real legitimate diminished chord. But let me show you some examples. Let's say I was going to be in the key of E major, okay? So I'm in the key of E major. So my 6 chords would be E major, F sharp minor would be my 2 chord. Hey, Robert, and hey, Rob. My 3 chord would be G sharp minor, right? So we have my major 1, minor 2, minor 3. My major 4 would be A. Major 5 would be B. And then my minor 6 would be C sharp. And of course, it's those 6 chords that make the world go round. And that's what I've talked about many times, is really getting used to those. Hey, Sean. So here comes the 7th chord. Okay, so the 7th chord is what we call half diminished. Okay, so if we're in the key of E, okay, we're looking at D sharp. Okay, so when we get to that 7th note, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, we need a minor 3rd, we need a flatted 5, and then we need a minor 7th. Okay, so I'm going to show you what that looks like. So this would be the diminished chord, the half diminished, which would occur naturally in a key, in a major scale. Hey, Michael. So I'm playing 6, 7, 6, 7 is what I'm playing. Now it sounds really nice, and you're going to really hear like, I always think of stuff like Somewhere Over the Rainbow or something like that, where you're really going to hear and see that diminished. It just really does have kind of for a rocker's ear anyway, it's a real kind of jazzy resolve, okay? So let's say I was descending this. Now you can already hear that there's something a little bit off about that diminished chord. You see? Now, the way we would use it in the real world, in pop music, in rock music, that sort of thing, I would probably do something like this. Instead of going from E to the D sharp diminished, I would go from E to E with D sharp in the bass. See that? And that's where you hear it in popular music, is that we're not actually playing D sharp as a diminished. We're actually playing D sharp. If I played E with D sharp in the bass, okay, what you're actually playing is a B chord. It's a B major chord. I don't know if that's confusing or not, but hey, buddy, from the Netherlands. Wow, I'm glad you're here. Yeah, I'm sure it's late for you. So you'll see what I'm doing there is I'm going 7, 9, 9. And then I'm moving down and playing 6, 9, 8, which you might have done that chord before. Like if you do right, that kind of chord. So that's taking the place of the diminished chord. So oftentimes, instead of doing the diminished, we wind up actually just playing this slash chord, E with D sharp in the bass in this case, okay? So that's what you're going to hear more as a resolution to the E than you would the diminished chord in most pop rock styles of music. Now, a diminished chord, oftentimes you hear them as a transitionary chord between something. Like if I was going from C to D, okay, I might go, and I'll use that diminished. Hey, Jared. I might use that diminished in between. You see? Now again, I'm playing it more as a power chord though than I am a full-fledged, you see? So there's lots of different ways that you can approach realistic, writing and pop music and things like that. And the diminished chord just doesn't pop out as being something that we use very often. But again, if you go back to, earlier music of the 20th century, you're going to hear the diminished chord in various different kinds of music. I just don't hear it a lot anymore. There's some Beatles songs and things like that that'll use them here and there. And if you're a big Beatles fan, I'd love for you to sometime in the VIP group, if you find a diminished chord and it's, discuss whether it's actually being used in a logical sense or whether or not it's not, right? These are kind of the thing. I miss those kind of conversations back in college where we would sit around and just talk about different things like that. Because music doesn't have to make sense, okay? But talking about these things sometimes is a really interesting thing. So anyway, let's see here. Clayt says, I have the 5 positions of the pentatonic scale down in the key of A only, and someone wants to play in the key of G. Can I still play the positions in the key of A but target the G notes? Well, there's more information there. If you're playing, because you just said you have the 5 positions of the pentatonic in the key of A, are you talking A minor or are you talking A major? Right? First of all. And if they're playing in the key of G, you probably wouldn't want to just stay in the key of A. You might find a way to make it work. Hey, Gary. But you're better off moving the whole thing down a whole step to G. Again, major and minor relative, of course. You got to make sure that you're using the proper things there. Let's see here. Joe says, let me get to Joe. My question is, I recently saw you do a video on the 7-string guitar. I was wondering if it would be an easier transition to get a baritone guitar as a second guitar or the 7-string. Well, the baritone is, thanks in advance. This is for Joe. I don't know if Joe is out there or not. This is, I just have Joe listed there. I suppose a baritone would probably be a better transition guitar, but even the baritone's not really going to get you much closer to the the weird thing about the 7-string is the 7-string, right? The first time, and you might have seen the video, obviously Joe saw the video I was talking about, but my first experience with the 7-string guitar was back in the late 90s with one of Steve Vai's. It was his Universe, when he came out with one of the Universe guitars. And back then the necks were bigger than they are now. But it wasn't, I mean, that threw me off, no doubt about it, because, there's stuff I talk about in the video with my hands being a certain size and things like that. But What really threw me off was the 7th string. Like trying to play a D chord seemed so far away, or playing a C chord seemed like I was on the wrong strings because of that interpretation of that 7th string. So the baritone, obviously, the difference is the baritone's going to have a little longer scale, more than likely, but it won't have another string to throw you off. But here's what I'm saying is, even when you do get a baritone, you might get used to the scale length, and that's awesome. But I think you're still going to have to figure out whether there's going to be a battle for you in terms of visualizing that 7th string and not letting it throw you off. You know, you get used to seeing, you know, your power chord. Your E is right here, right? Right? So you're chunking on that 6th string. Well, on a 7th string, it feels like you're playing on the 5th string, right? Because you're moving, or on the 4th string. So that's what gets weird about it, is the visualization factor of it. If you can get past that, like I said, when I came back to the 7th string a few years ago, it wasn't an issue at all. I'm not saying I don't ever run into certain things that I have to stop and ponder for a little bit, but they're for a little bit and then they're gone. Where before I wasn't ready for a 7th string. So, long story short, it may help you in terms of its comfortability being longer, but I think you're still going to have to really make that choice on whether or not that 7th string is going to throw you for a loop. Okay? Dan says, when playing licks or fast scales, I'm having a hard time keeping my pinky close to the strings. It wants to fly around. The only thing you can do, Dan, really to try and curb that is try and practice. When you practice slow, when you're practicing your exercises, let me get my screen back here. When you're practicing your exercises, because you'll see mine comes off a little ways too. Like it comes out here. It's not sitting right here. If I'm doing something like that, then it's going to be closer. Right? But if I'm going... Right? My pinky's going to go out a little bit further than it probably should too. The only thing you can do is really try and work on, like if you're trying your 3rd and your pinky, you might just practice. But see, for me, to really get a grind off of that for the pull-off, because it's a smaller finger and it's a weaker finger, I really do got to kind of flick it a little further than I would one of my other 3 fingers to get the power off of it. That's the problem for me, is getting enough power off of it because it's such a weak finger. So it does move a little bit more. With some of my students, when I used to teach private lessons and they would be practicing things like this, or whatever it might be that they were practicing, I used to take my hand and set it here so their fingers would keep running into my hand to try and help train them to think to play a little bit smaller, if that helps you, Dan. Rich says, I purchased a double neck Epiphone. The pickups are not great. Do you think DiMarzio breeds I took out of my Ibanez Gem would go good in the 12-string portion? Ooh, I don't know. I mean, it depends on what kind of sound you're looking for, Rich. Hey, William. That's the thing is it's always about the sound. I mean, obviously the breeds are going to be a little bit hotter. I don't know that I would put something that hot in for the 12-string side of things, because you're probably going to be doing a lot of clean playing on the 12-string side of things, I would think, right? I mean, I don't know for sure, but if you were planning on doing a lot of clean playing, you might want to rethink that. You know, the hardest thing is obviously if you put them in, you can always just take them back out again, especially if you know how to do pickups. But yeah, Rich, I would probably put them on the 6 side of things for sure. The 12-string side, I think I would go with something, a little cleaner for that. So, but yeah, that's what I would do if I were you. If you're trying to save a little money and keep those breeds, that's what I would consider doing. Okay, so let's get back to our sheet here. Yeah, you're welcome, buddy. Alan says, how do you know where to change the chords in a song when they are not written down in the song? Well, Alan, if you don't know where to change them and they're not written down, this goes back into, I've got a new guitar course. I redid Ear Training Made Easy. I updated it and did a bunch of new stuff in it, and that's coming out sometime soon here. Ear Training Made Easy. So if you already own Ear Training Made Easy, you can get it for a big discount. And if you don't, you might want to check it out. But for me, anytime I learn anything, anything, whether it's a solo, whether it's a melody, whether it's a chord progression, whatever it is, it all starts with my ear. It all starts with listening to the structure of the song and the flow of the parts and the repetition and non-repetition, right? What parts repeat, what parts are different, which I always call red flag parts. What are some unique things that happen in the song that I could see myself getting lost in if I was playing it live or something like that? So for me, again, if it's something that I'm going to play and it's gone, right, and it's really easy, I might not spend that much time listening to it. But if it's something I need to learn for a band, or I got hired to do some recording or something like that, the best thing for me is always, before I ever start trying to play anything, is I just listen to the song. And I go, again, I call it going deep, right? I go underground with the song. I don't just listen to the words or, try and memorize the chorus or something. I try and listen first at bird's eye view to kind of listen to the overview of what the song is doing, right? And get comfortable with what might be a verse and a chorus. And again, the red flag parts, all those kind of things. And then I zoom in a bit and start trying to figure out, what am I hearing? Am I hearing this thing here, whatever this is called, a verse or whatever? What am I hearing in there, right? Are there some single note things? Are there some chord things? How many chords am I hearing? How many times am I hearing it repeat? Are there any other things that are changing in there? And then I keep kind of zooming in as I go, going, okay, so now I'm going to look at this, here was the song, and then here were some of the parts, and then here's the verse or whatever it is. And now I'm dissecting that part, maybe the first 4 measures or something. And Jared said, that's my favorite part of learning a new song, listening for that timing. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that's what it is for me. So by the time I start playing the song, I've already plotted out, as much as I can anyway, what my plan is and how many things I'm hearing, right? If I'm playing it by ear, I have no choice. Like when I learn things by ear, which I know you guys are in the VIP group, either it's already out or there's a couple of examples of me breaking down, listening to a song and trying to go in deep and figure these things out. If I'm doing it by ear, I try and get a bird's eye view, but then at some point I just got to start trying to dig in and figure out what's happening in a particular section. Then I'll write it down, record myself playing it on video so I don't forget it, and then I'll learn another section, and then I'll splice those 2 pieces together, that sort of thing. If I was using tablature or some sort of notation, I still would listen to it like that. But oftentimes, like, there have been times that I've driven to a gig and I need to play whatever songs, and I'm going to have a rehearsal, like a single rehearsal with whoever, and that's it. So oftentimes I've already listened to the songs a bunch, and maybe I've looked at the notation or I've looked at the tablature and had what I'm seeing start making sense with what I'm listening to. So by the time I get my hands or the guitar in my hands, I've already kind of planned out how it goes, and I can already see what the parts are. I just need to start playing. So yeah, thank you, Scotty. I appreciate that. So maybe that can help you a little bit. Okay, Rich, let's see here. You can do me a favor. You can post, if you didn't see the option to get the new course at a discount. I don't know when the emails have started coming, but if they are out, and you didn't get anything, please just post it in the VIP group, and I'll have Derek make sure that you're on the list or whatever. So I apologize if you're not, and just post it in the VIP. Tag me in it, and then I'll tag Derek, and we'll get it figured out. Okay. But that's a great way, is whenever you're approaching songs, some songs are really easy and they don't take a lot of your time. Some songs are harder and you really got to bear down and listen to them. And sometimes they're just, the song's too much. Like if I was going to sit down and do A Change of Seasons by Dream Theater, which is, I love that song if you know what that is, but it's like 20 some minutes long or something like that. I can't just sit and listen to that whole thing. I mean, it's segments of songs, right, that are mashed together to make one long epic song. So I would listen to the little pieces and do what I'm talking about, and then listen to the next piece and do the same thing, and so on. So hopefully that helps you. All right, let's see. Julius. Okay, hey, Julius, I don't know if you're out there, but Julius, if you are, let's go ahead and... Did I miss something? Oh, Terrence, I'm sorry, Terrence, if I missed your question there. Steve, my pinky knuckle near the fingernail locks up a lot. No, the only thing is, and I've seen, Terrence, I've never had that issue, but I've seen people that have that where the the finger will get locked. And I guess the one thing you got to kind of be careful with when you're playing is if there's a certain spot, Terrence, where if you go far enough, it locks at that particular spot, you may have to try and learn to stay forward of that, right? I'm sorry, I should be looking at the camera. I'm looking at his message over there. But yeah, it's a weird thing, guys. I mean, our fingers are so weird and our bodies are, trying to learn how to play guitar. Everybody's got different things, including me. I think the big thing, though, is if you're trying to develop a certain technique or a pattern or, strength or whatever it might be that you're doing, you just have to really become aware of those issues that you've got and what might be the solution, right? Because what else is there, right? I mean, the other option is, to be completely honest with you, Terrence, if your finger was locking up a lot, like let's say your pinky's locking up and you can't get it to work because every time you're trying to do something, you might wind up not using your pinky very often, right? And I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm saying you find a way that works. You know what I mean? Oh, that's okay, Francis. Thanks for being here. Guys, you find a way that works. When I was a Montessori instructor, I taught Montessori for 14 years. And I remember we used to always tell our kids, that's the thing is, in the Montessori school, you find a way that works. If the traditional way of doing something isn't working, you try and find something else that's going to work. And, sometimes we just have to do that. That's okay. It doesn't make us any less anything. We just have to find what works. Links1 says, any suggestions for older players that have arthritis in their hands? Lead lines are easier to play than chords. Exercises, Links, I would say a lot of stretching for sure. Do a lot of stretching. Warm up with water. Warm up your hands, warm up your forearms. Do a lot of warm up, a lot of stretching. Don't hurt yourself, but do a lot of that kind of stuff. Take ibuprofen or whatever it is that you can take, especially on the days when you've got some work involved. I'm not saying take too much, but there are days, because I've got arthritis too. So certain days I take more than others because I've got a lot of work to do, right? But for me, to be completely honest, what warms my hands up, because I've told you all this, when I first wake up in the morning and I grab the guitar, the first thing I do when I grab the guitar, if I try and play like I like to play, I can't. My fingers don't work, okay? So if I had to do a gig at 7 in the morning, I'd be up at 5 preparing, because I have to go through and do some warm-up stuff, before and again, not necessarily in a strengthening way, which is good too, no doubt, but just in a warm-up way. Like I'll do little exercises where I'm just trying to warm up my fingers, nothing with a metronome or anything like that, just trying to get all my fingers to start kind of obeying and paying attention to each other and responding to what I'm trying to tell them to do. That doesn't work in the morning. It just doesn't. And it used to freak me out. Like I used to wake up and go, oh my God, what's going on? And now I've just learned it comes with the territory. So when I wake up in the morning, I don't hit it hard. I just warm up with water, with stretching, all that kind of stuff. And then, thank you. Yep, 5-minute miracle fingers. Yeah. So I stretch out, all that kind of stuff. And then I usually do a lot of legato things where I'll just practice different stuff. Again, not hard, not trying to go way too fast, just trying to relax everything, okay? Let's see here. Jared said, I owe me made a finger, which he's right. Let's see here. Paul says, hey, Steve, what's your opinion on Brian May? I'd really love to see some more. Paul, I have got an entire course on Brian May coming out soon. I love Brian May, and Queen stuff. Even for the casual listener that doesn't know a lot of the Queen catalog, Queen stuff is so much fun to play. So much fun to play. So I've got all kinds of stuff, Paul. I'm finishing up a couple things right now. But when I get done with that, I'm going to hit right back in there and get some more. And there will be all kinds of Queen stuff coming soon. Yeah, really fun. I'm very excited. Yeah, I love that stuff. Mark says, I know you had wrist issues. I have tennis elbow. Yeah. I've had that before too. That sucks, man. Any tips for managing that? Listen, Mark and everybody, because there's a lot of us that aren't as young as we used to be. You have to stretch out. And, stretching your arms, stretching your shoulders, stretching your neck. Like at night before I go to bed, I sit, we have hardwood floors upstairs. I sit on the hardwood floor. crisscross applesauce, if you will, right? And I stretch out my legs. I'd rather sit on the floor than I would on a couch. And I stretch out, and then in the morning I stretch out. It's all about taking care of yourself. And if you are going to have because the injuries happen of one of two reasons. Either you haven't really warmed up enough, and you need to learn how to do that in a way that makes sense for you. And the second thing is that you have a really aggressive practice. One day, you're sitting there and you practice for 3 hours and it's just been hardcore. And if you have, then sometimes there's repercussions for those. I get the same thing. And sometimes I do have to take a day or two off, right? If my elbow's hurting or something like that. Usually, like my shoulder and stuff is where I have so many problems. But it just comes down to a lot of stretching and, trying to eat better, trying to drink a lot of water, which helps a ton. And, those are the things. I used to go to a buddy of mine is a physical therapist. I haven't seen him in a little while, but he would tell me how even being a physical therapist and working on people in his practice, he had issues, right? As a physical therapist. So, yeah, look at Sean. He said, physical therapy helped me tremendously. Yeah, I'm telling you, that stuff makes a difference. If you can afford some physical therapy, chiropractic help, anything like that, those things, just getting older in general, help a lot. I haven't been in for physical therapy in a long time, but I'm thinking I have to. Because I sit like this for, 8 hours a day or sometimes even more, all these muscles on both sides get all tangled up, and then they have to use this metal bar. If you guys have ever seen that before, it's called like gresting or something like that, where they dig into the meat to stretch out those tendons and stuff, and then you leave and you're all bruised up and stuff. It's just, but it works. I mean, it takes a few times, but oh my gosh. Yeah, I've never tried acupuncture. But listen, if I'm always up for ideas. You guys can throw them out there in the VIP group. If you got something that you think works, I'm all about hearing it. Because I go through the same things. I just really try and take care of myself. Before I started working for GuitarZoom, I used to do, 8 hours of lessons a day or 10 hours of lessons a day, and then all these other things. So sitting down all day sucked. Now, at least, I can do some video and I could do whatever, and I could practice and I can get up and I can go outside. I could walk around. I walk around quite a bit during the day to think about content that I'm creating or different things like that. And just getting up on a regular basis helps me a lot too. So anyway, hopefully that helps you a little bit. Yeah, Queen, it's coming. I'm very excited. So Sean, let's see here. Paul says, Steve, can you talk a little bit about using mode scales and implementing them into your progressions for solos? Well, yeah. I mean, there's it's hard to just talk about using modes because it depends on, absolutely, Mark. The first thing about modes is you have to understand what they are and how they work, right? I mean, that's the most important thing is if you're going to use Dorian or something, you have to understand what that means and how you're going to apply it in the real world. That's the thing about using modes. So that's why I always like to try and teach people, which I'm sure you've seen videos on that, where I teach people what I call pentatonic expansions, right? So you're starting with a pentatonic idea. Let me back off that distortion a little bit. And then you add a note in. And just by adding that one note gives you a half step where the pentatonic the pentatonic is lacking is any half steps. And half steps oftentimes are where you get that real melody from. Not that you can't get melody from pentatonic, you can, but it's that half step. So what modes do is you're really just taking two more notes and you're adding it back into your pentatonic, but the notes that you're adding in are defining what mode you're actually in, and you kind of have to study modes to understand that, Paul, and unfortunately we just don't have time to go that deep into it. But what I do when I solo is I don't really think that much about being in pentatonic versus being in diatonic versus whatever. Pentatonic for me is always there, okay? Pentatonic always exists. It's always sitting there. So if I was playing, for instance, in E, right? So I'm doing E minor. See that's a pentatonic little run, but I'm really not conscious of trying to play pentatonic, then diatonic, then pentatonic, then diatonic. It's just part of the playing style of mine. You know, sometimes I'll play more diatonic licks like that, and then sometimes I'll do like a pentatonic run, because then it contrasts from that diatonic sound. Oh, you're talking about these tone knobs? These are the ones that came with them, but if you look up guitar, you know, volume knobs, there's all kinds of cool ones out there on the internet, they call it. You know, I used to have like skull ones and all kinds of different things, but anyway. So you see, the trick for me is always learning to combine. It's all about rhythm, phrasing, and melody, and then adding some flair on top of that, right? So when you're playing, and maybe you add some sort of fill in there, right? You know, so I'm always combining all of these different elements at the same time. So I hope that helps you a little bit, Paul. I apologize. Because, I mean, really, that is the crux, isn't it? What I try and get people to understand, and I'm sure this will answer a couple other questions that I've got on the sheet as well, on the QA or the questionnaire sheet. If you start by trying to create a nice phrase and make a connection with the melody, okay, which you're going to wind up needing diatonic or modal notes to make that connection to the melody no matter what, right? Because the pentatonic is just not going to give you all of those notes that you really want. To create those sounds. And then I throw in some blues stuff, which I always do. Trying to think about some of this stuff, but anyway, so those are the kind of things I think about. I'm always thinking about avenues, and then I'm trying to make some connection to the music. Okay. Robert says, oh, sorry. Let's see here. We got a few things here. Sorry about that. Play Guitar for Life is a great place to start. Thank you, Jared. Yeah, I love that course. I thought it was, it turned out to be one of my favorite courses for sure. Let's see here. I'm doing the pentatonic part in your lessons. What would be the next step after that? Well, the biggest thing is doing pentatonic. And again, this goes for everybody. Always think of your practice as two different ways. One is doing a route, R-O-U-T-E, a route practice, where you're doing it over and over and over to visualize it, to memorize it, to work on the technique of it, right? When you sit and you do... right? You want to do that, whatever it is that you're doing, whatever scales. But that's route practice. You're doing it over and over and over and over and over, trying to develop what you can see, trying to develop how well you can play it. You know, exercises can be route practice, all those. But then there's the creative practice. The creative practice is when you take those, like meandering is one of my favorites, right? You take these scales that you're learning how to play in pentatonic, and you start trying to figure out you know, pentatonic doesn't have to be boring. There's a ton of great things that you can say or you can play using pentatonic. So it isn't just pentatonic should be a starter place and then you move up and keep going. It isn't really that, okay? It's learning how to control using those bends and vibrato and slides and hammer-ons and pull-offs and all that kind of stuff. And blues notes, right? You know, whatever. And dynamics, you know, loud and soft and all those kind of things that really sell it. So for me, the next level, whether it's, a modal thing or something like that, doesn't change any of this. It's just adding more opportunity by adding different notes. Okay? Let's see here. Pentatonic is kind of like an arpeggio. It kind of is. I mean, that's the thing, is there's lots of ways to visualize your pentatonics. It doesn't just have to be a box. Like, you can learn to see all kinds of cool stuff. Right? As you're playing. For me, it's not so much about how much you know, it's the control you have over the things that you do. Because what the biggest problem that most guitar players, and probably just most people in general in life, is that we're overachievers. Certainly as guitar players, we tend to be. So we learn a ton of stuff, but we really have no way to make it cohesive. We don't know how to use the stuff musically when we play. And so every time we go to jam or we get together with people or something like that, the same routine spits out of us. There's no new things happening. It's just the same thing. We go, well, how come I'm practicing all this stuff at home, and then when I get together and jam, none of that works? Well, because you haven't brought it to a creative level yet, right? You haven't learned it on an absolute level. You need to get whatever it is that you're trying to do, whether it's bends or vibrato or, pentatonic expansions or just pentatonic creativity or diet or whatever. But you got to get to a place where it's comfortable. So when that music starts and you look down, you've got all kinds of different things going on, and you just go, I think I'm going to go here. Now I'm going to head over here. Now I'm going to do something right here, right? Now I'm going to do some things over here. And you've got all of these different choices on places that you can go to do something interesting as you play. That's half the fun of this stuff, is figuring out how to get around, finding new ways, different licks and things like that. I just work on this stuff all the time. But okay, anyway, hopefully that helps you a little bit. Let's keep going. We got about 15 more minutes here. Okay, so Julius, why C minor 7 chord composed of C, E flat, G, and B flat is called dominant? It cannot be the 5th chord of any major scale. Well, it's got a dominant 7. The C minor 7 chord isn't a dominant chord. It's got a dominant 7th. Okay? But it's not the dominant chord, but it does contain the dominant 7, which is B flat, right? The flat 7 or the minor 7, the dominant 7. Okay? So Julius, if you're out there, I wouldn't call it a dominant chord either. I would call it a minor chord with a dominant 7. Okay? I got a couple of riffs, rock songs of my own. Any hints on how to write for the second 6-string guitar? Is that what you call layering? Yeah, layering, there's lots of ways you can use the term layering, but layering, yeah, I mean, the thing about writing is, for me, half the fun of writing is you're trying to figure out what the other guitar player would do, right? So if you've got somebody that's going, you might take and do an octave over the B, right? Which is the 5th of the E chord or something like that. Or you might make some sort of some sort of little riff or something like that you'd be doing over the top of that. So there's lots of different things that you can do for layering. Sometimes you've got, somebody that's playing a low chord and somebody that's playing a high chord, and then somebody that's playing you can do all kinds of different stuff. But that's the craziness of songwriting, is there's just a billion things you could do. Okay? Oh, hey, Gary. Gary from Tasmania, I'm glad you could join us. That's awesome. Don't worry about that. If you're late, that's okay. I'll post it in the group anyway, and you can watch the rest of it. Let's see here. Marlo says, concerning fingering for bar chords, do major bar chords always use the index finger, or is that only for minor bar chords? Well, you got to know, the big thing, Marlo, is knowing where your bar chords are coming from. That answers your question. Like, don't just try and memorize, which finger goes on, which finger goes off for major or minor, because that can get really confusing. And I know, because I used to do the same thing. Okay? But if you're doing bar chords, your index finger would be down because that's what's creating the bar. Okay? What makes it major or minor in this case is going to be this finger, the middle finger. And the reason is because my 6-string bar chords are coming from E chords, right? I'm moving the E chord up, which is what's making the bar chord. So if the chord initially is major to begin with, when I move it up, they're subsequently all going to be major. If the chord was minor to begin with, then they're all going to be minor. Because on the 5th string, you have an A chord that moves up and that's major, but A minor looks like this. This is what screwed me up when I was a kid, was E major looked like this, and A minor looked exactly the same one string down. And I couldn't hear major and minor at that time. Major, minor. So I was trying to memorize like middle finger on, middle finger off kind of stuff, and then I'd get to the 5th string, and then I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense anymore. And it wasn't until I started going, okay, I got to figure out where I'm coming from. Like, what chord am I using to create my bar chords? And that will give me the answer. And plus, if I develop my ear a little bit more, I can hear that minor sound, right? Or the major sound, whatever it is I'm looking for. So hopefully that helps you a little bit. Let's see here. I prefer to use the thumb over the top of any bar chord. Yeah, that's okay. That's awesome. And that's the thing, is you got to have big hands to be able to throw your thumb over the top. But I think that's wonderful. I think it's a great way of doing them. Mark says, can you give us more arpeggios for metal? What I would try and do, Mark, and there's a lot of this. I know there's been some new stuff in the VIP group too, but the big thing with arpeggios is trying to find unique ways of, instead of just playing, sweep style arpeggios, is finding more unique sounding ones. That's what I like to do. Like all the guys that I listen to, like Per Nilsson, who's now playing with Meshuggah, but he used to be with Scar Symmetry, guys like that. The way they play is that they're always looking for unique ways of playing their arpeggios by using what's called 2-1-2 patterns. So for instance, instead of just playing an E minor arpeggio like that, what you do is try and find a more unique way of playing it so it sounds more interesting, and it feels better because it's not just doing the sweeping technique, right? I'm not making fun of the sweep. There's nothing wrong with sweeping. But if I did this and I played 7 to 10 and then went to 9, but instead of going 7, 10, 9, 9, which would be the traditional way of doing it, I'm going to go 7, 10, 9, and then here I'm going to play 7 and 11. And all of a sudden I start getting, I'm not going to say it's more Marty Friedman, but it certainly is more than just a traditional sweep kind of idea. So you'll notice I'm playing 2 notes on this string, 1 note on this string, 2 notes on this string, and I can do those in any order I want. It doesn't have to be strict or anything. It just makes it easier for me to play it as opposed to just having 1 note on each string. So it's kind of a Paul Gilbert thing as well. So as I play, I'm playing 7, 10, 9, 7, 11. And then here, there's all kinds of things I could do, but I'm going to move up and do 8, 12 and 8, 12. So I have, right? Or I might just stop on that 8. And then go into something else. So what I do is I try and I'll pick a key, like let's say I'm in E minor, right? So I try and pick a key and figure out how many different ways I could play some cool sounding arpeggios. See, I just find them all over the place. And I keep looking for those all over the fretboard, just different unique shapes that sound kind of cool, that break up the traditional kind of sweep picking thing. I haven't done the sweep picking stuff in many years, and it's a fine technique. It's just, it was never really my thing. So I like the more intervallic sounding, arpeggios, I guess. So hopefully that helps you a little bit. Rich says kind of intervallic. Yeah, I would say so, for sure. Cedric says, I'm working on Play Guitar for Life and have also your rock guitar course. I'm interested in playing rock music. what music group should I be listening to? Well, it all depends on what you like. I mean, I'm very happy that I grew up listening to artists of, I was born in 1970, so growing up listening to stuff my parents listened to from the 60s and things. And then when I got in the early 80s, I was listening to a lot of 70s with Kansas and Rush and Ted Nugent and Styx and Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix and all that kind of stuff. And then folk stuff like Bob Dylan and Neil Young and Crosby, Stills and Nash, and I loved Creedence Clearwater Revival, all that stuff. And then I got into the more metal stuff with Judas Priest and Iron Maiden. And I just always thought all that stuff from that era was really nice because, learning how to... it's really straightforward, but you hear it and you know what it is, right? Things like that. Right? All those kind of riff, all that kind of stuff. Now, I know some of this is from the 80s, but you get the idea. Kiss, right? Let's see. All that kind of stuff. That's so riffs to me were really essential. Ozzy, right? Learning how to do all that kind of stuff was really great because you'd hear it and then you'd replicate it. Motley Crue and Def Leppard and all those kind of things. All the... I love all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, well, that's all right. Old timer, he says, 1950. See, then you go back and you've got, there's lots of great stuff for me, my mom listened to a lot of doo-wop music and things like that, which would bring us into that would be the 50s, though. But yeah, just any of that kind of stuff. Obviously, the Beatles I was really into. The Stones I was really into, okay? Just all kinds of good stuff, yeah. So I think those are great places to start. You don't have to try and do, Five-Finger Death Punch. And there's nothing wrong with that either. It's whatever anybody likes. It's not my job to judge anybody. But just if it's a riff, it's easier to replicate because you can hear it, right? When you hear... right? Or... when you hear those sounds... you know what it is. Well, if you listen to the kind of music I do, you know what it is. But, but anyway, and you could tell by the smile on my face, I love that kind of stuff. I love playing it. I love jamming it. I love performing those songs. It's just great stuff, So anyway, that's a good place to start. Let's see. Saw The Wall live at Nassau Coliseum in 80. Wow, that is good stuff. That is really good stuff. Okay, let's keep going here. Sherry says, what is a pre-bend? A pre-bend is when you bend without picking it, right? So if I did this, again, I got to make sure you can see me. I got so many things open on my screen I can't see at the same time. So if I went like this and I pre-bent, so I'm bending it up before I pick it. That's how you pre-bend. Sometimes I like to pre-bend and I'll just leave it up there, like I'll bend it. Because it just sounds kind of weird. Kind of like a slide. I think that sounds really cool. But yeah, there's lots of ways you can do that. Let's see. It's hard to figure out the sequential methodology for taking the courses. I'm wondering if they could be labeled beginner, intermediate, or advanced. It's really hard, John. I know exactly what you're saying. But that's the hard part is the courses are all kind of, they all focus on different things. Because it's really hard to figure out to go from a particular course, like Play Guitar for Life is all encompassing. So it's really meant to kind of last you forever. But if you do decide you want a little more theory, you can branch out. Or you want a little more blues, you can branch out, or whatever it might be. When you look at something like ear training made easy, there's really no certain time that's best to have because we're all so different. That's what makes it so tough. I've talked to the guys about even trying to make some courses that are volume 1, volume 2, volume 3, and maybe I'll do that at some point. But the beginner thing makes sense, like having some beginner courses and intermediate courses. And John, I'll look into that a little bit more and see if I can do something like that too. Okay. But yeah, they don't really go in an order as much as they just try and cover different things that people are, asking to try and learn. So, if you're looking at all about intervals or something like that, and you're trying to learn about intervals or arpeggios or something, I mean, who knows where that fits in terms of other things that you're learning. Logically, usually you start with open chords and strumming and learning how to play some songs and things like that. And then maybe you move into some flat picking, maybe learning some scales, pentatonic, things like that. Beginnings of soloing from there, which is where Guitar Solos Made Easy is a good course. But, you even Guitar Solos Made Easy, you got to have some semblance of understanding some scale things. Yeah, I'll work on that though, John. It's something that's always in the back of my brain, and I really should try and figure out something I can do to help you with that a little bit. Hey, Steve, can you explain how the shape of the first position of the pentatonic changes when you're in drop tuning? The only thing that changes, Chris, is the 6th string. So if you were in drop tuning, you would just play the 6th string a whole step higher, right? So if I'm playing this, now I'm not in drop tuning right now, but if I played this and I went... Instead of playing 8-5, I move it up and play 10-7. That's all you would do. You would just shift that 6th string. Okay. Let's see here. Cool. Depends on where you are now. Yep, that's true. I need more practice with my timing. Rich says, even with the metronome, I struggle. You got to spend a lot of time with it. Learning metronome is one of the key things because you can take whatever riff or whatever, metal thing you're working on, Rich, and just repeat it over and over and over. But you got to make sure that the tempo's at a decent speed to where you can feel the tempo, right? I know a lot of players that they never set their tempo at like 80. They'd rather set it at 160, right? Which is just twice as fast. So you feel the 8th note. So even if you're going dun, 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 if you set it at, sometimes makes it easier to try and feel that beat when you're practicing along. So that's something that you could try too. Thank you, Francis. Okay, cool. Let's see here. Oh, it's 10-2. I hate to get going here. I'm sure some of you will be joining me in the next hour, which I'm going to go get something to drink quick, and then I'll be back. And I'll try to get to some of these other questions. But remember, you can always post some questions in the VIP group, and we can talk about them as a group, and I'd be more than happy to be a part of that as well. So this hour went by really fast. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time and just hanging out with me today. And stay positive, keep practicing, and we will talk to you soon, especially if you're going to be in the next class, all right? Everybody take care. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Let's see. How was your training 2 made easy 2.0 different? Well, first of all, it's updated because the video was all 720p. Now we're all at 1080p. I added a whole new section on intervallic studies. There's a bunch of quizzes in there. I guess the overall framework is just really, really different than the other one. I didn't even use the other one as a template to create the new one. I just started from scratch and rebuilt a whole new one. So, all right, everybody take care, and I'll talk to you soon, okay?